Good evening. I'm calling the Camarillo Planning Commission regular meeting of Tuesday, April 4th to order. And welcome to those of you that are here in the audience and those of you that are watching at home. Mr. Secretary, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Davidson. Here. Commissioner Murphy.
Here.
Commissioner Lamone. Here. Commissioner Edsel.
Here.
Chair Vandermeulen.
Here. Thank you. And Commissioner Edsel will lead the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item is our consent items, which consists of our Planning Commission minutes from the last meeting. Are there any questions, concerns, corrections? If so, can I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
And I'll second.
Okay, so that was seconded by Commissioner Davidson and first by Commissioner Murphy. So please vote. All right. Then we go on to our one item of our public hearing. So with that, I'm going to open the public hearing. Oh, excuse me. I take that back. We're going to have our staff presentation first, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Our staff presentation will be made by Mitchell Morrison, our assistant planner.
Good evening, Chair Vandermeulen and fellow commissioners. My name is Mitchell Morrison. I'm an assistant planner here at the Department of Community Development. This evening, I'll be presenting tentative tract map T6080 for the existing Camarillo Village Square Shopping Center. We'll start with the location. You're familiar with the location. It's at the southeast corner there of Las Posas Road and R. Neal Road. Currently, it's an existing commercial shopping center that is well known to all of us, the Camarillo Village Square Shopping Center. The subdivision will create new lots, but will have no physical effect on the existing buildings. Here's a view of the project site. It's an aerial shot. It's a 20-acre site, so it's pretty big. I put an aerial in here just so you could see the entire site, big picture, looking south over Las Posas Drive. The existing tenant inventory is well recognizable to all of you. There's anchor tenants there, and Starbucks and Ross, and Rite Aid, Sprouts Market, major tenants that we're all familiar with. So how did we get here? In 1962, the Ventura County Board of Zoning Adjustment granted a planned development permit, PD 219, for what was then called the Las Posas Village Shopping Center. This predated incorporation of the city of Camarillo in 1964. Then in 1998, the Planning Commission approved a request to extend and to expand and remodel the existing retail center under Commercial Plan Development 138 in the form we know today. But since 1998 to present, the City Planning Commission and staff have processed 30 modifications to that plan development permit based on the changing needs of the tenants and the shopping center. Where are we going? So for purposes of lease, sale, or conveyance, the proposed project is to subdivide the existing parcel map into a commercial tract map. Now, the proposed tract map will create 8 lots, varying sizes, but they'll all total to 22.45 acres, which is the existing size. So the proposed map will result in no physical effect on the existing buildings or site improvements, and the subject property is already served by existing roadways, access drives, water lines, sewer lines, and drainage facilities. I delineated the extent of the existing parcel map here on this slide. NAP stands for not a part, so there at the northwest part of the project site is the existing Starbucks. That's not a part. And then at the southwest corner there, it's also not a part. And if you vote to approve, that little parcel there on the west would be included in the new proposed map. So I put a little animation in there to make it clear that that parcel would be included in the proposed subdivision. So here's the proposed tract map. To make this as clear as possible, I wanted to go in order of the proposed lots from 1 to 8. Lot 1 is here in the west, and Lot 2 is on the north. And there in the center is Lot 3. To the south is 4. East of that is Lot 5. East of that is Lot 6. The largest of the proposed lots is Lot 7. And then in the middle here, toward the north, is Lot 8. In terms of ingress and egress, which is important to the project under the Subdivision Map Act, there's currently ingress and egress from Arneal Road here, and there's a second and a third means of ingress and egress from Arneal, and then there's a means of ingress and egress from Las Posas Road here on the north. Now, in terms of the conditions of approval, I wanted to highlight a couple of those, and I'll tell you about the conditions. So there's conditions of approval there are in your agenda packets, and they require formation of a commercial owners association to manage the common space. So it's currently under one ownership, and if the subdivision is approved, then it creates these new lots, and the commercial owners association would be responsible for maintenance of shared parking, landscape, and utilities. And on page 3 of the agenda report, in paragraph 3, there is an error that says that the shopping center currently requires 1,111 parking spaces and provides 1,125 spaces. So it's switched around in the agenda report, but in actuality, the shopping center provides more parking than is required. So the shopping center has a surplus of 14 parking spaces. So the two numbers in the agenda report on page 3 are just switched. So I just wanted to clarify that in here. So just with the point being that they meet parking, they actually exceed the parking requirements by 14 spaces. So for the what staff reviewed is, and this project was it was unique in the sense that there's already a commercial shopping center there. So when staff was reviewing this, we were looking to make sure that the newly created lots would meet the zoning ordinance requirements for lot size, building coverage, lot depth, and lot width. So this is I won't go over all these numbers in detail, but they're in your agenda reports. This is showing that the proposed lots would meet the zoning ordinance requirements for those 4 key areas: lot size, building coverage, depth, and width. In terms of environmental review, staff reviewed the project in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act and the state CEQA guidelines, as well as the city's environmental guidelines. Staff determined that the project is categorically exempt from CEQA under Class 1 because of its existing facility, and the project proposes no expansion of the current existing uses. Furthermore, because the project results in no physical change, the project's also exempt from CEQA under a common sense exemption, which states that CEQA only applies to projects that have the potential for causing a significant impact on the environment. There's been some clarifications that staff have processed to the recommended conditions of approval. So at the request of Commissioner Limon, staff has clarified the recommended conditions regarding in these 3 areas. One is clarifying the purpose of the Commercial Owners Association, and the requirements of the conditions, covenants, and restrictions, and then just providing overall consistency and conciseness across the conditions of approval. So in terms of suggested actions, the path forward from here, the staff recommends finding that the project is categorically exempt from CEQA. Staff recommends adopting a resolution recommending approval of the tentative tract by the City Council, subject to the recommended conditions of approval with the clarifications and consistency modifications. And the action of the Planning Commission is final unless an appeal is filed within 10 days of the action. This concludes staff's presentation.
Okay. Any questions from the side?
Yes. Now I'm on. So in a worst-case sort of nuclear meltdown version where the new owners who buy all these lots don't get along and they're not abiding by these covenants, and the place just really starts to become an eyesore, what recourse or what tools can staff explain to me what tools they will have to ensure enforcement of it so that it does? I mean, it's beautiful now. I'd like it to stay that way. Thank you.
You can go ahead.
So I'll go ahead and take that one. So we will have the commercial owners association that we can rely on for any maintenance or upkeep of the common area there. For the individual lots themselves, a building, they still have to follow the city standard on that one, on the individual ones themselves. But typically it would be, and if there was any complaints, it would, or I guess infighting or pointing fingers of who's doing what, we'd be able to revert back to the Commercial Owners Association and compliance.
Okay, yeah,
process.
My question wasn't so much what can we do about the infighting, it's more the end result if their inability, and I'm not suggesting that's going to be the case, but face it, it happens, if the development itself starts to deteriorate, and so the parking lot hasn't been sealed and striped in forever, and so it's literally crumbling, what can we do about the physical manifestations of the failure of the COA to take action? Does the city have any teeth to basically liquefy damages to the lawyers in the room? Can we go after them for anything because they're not doing what they said they would?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, our Code Compliance Division routinely inspects all the properties twice a year at least, driving through. So they'll pick that up and be able to, through our, code compliance process, basically make them aware of, that there is a deficiency there that they have to correct and work out a time frame for them to do that.
Perfect, thanks.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner
I
Etzel?
had a question too. Yeah, so would it be set up like is it going to be an HOA or is it just going to be more of an informal agreement between the owners? Because I'm thinking the only thing in town that I think we can compare it to is the commercial property off Pickwick. And it's never been upgraded because I don't know what kind of a structure they have, do you? But there were times where, some of the owners wanted to upgrade the center and they couldn't get consensus on it. So, in this agreement, should that be part of it, that the owners can vote if it's time to upgrade the center and you got a couple of the owners saying that they don't want to participate for financial reasons or whatever, then that becomes a problem. So,
Yeah, this, as a condition of approval, that they will have to form the Commercial Owners Association, which is similar to a homeowners association, that will be responsible for maintaining the common areas.
So would it be regulated just like the HOA where they're required to fund deferred maintenance
Yeah.
and that kind of thing?
Yeah, generally, yes.
You get it,
Yeah.
you get it audited and,
Yeah, the Pickwick commercial area that you're referring to, we're aware of that because nothing was recorded, nothing was formally formed.
because they never had an agreement, huh? It was just individual owners that
Yeah.
could never come together on doing anything with that, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what we definitely want to avoid.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Lamone, any questions?
Yes. Thank you. First, I want to appreciate the staff's due diligence in processing the application and the steps that you've taken already to ensure the maintenance of the aesthetics and safety of the commercial center moving forward. And I also want to thank you for so quickly turning around in response to the redlined version in response to my comments and feedback. I know that you have a lot on your plates, and I was very impressed by that. I also want to note in response to a former question, there is current now in paragraph 22, the project conditions can be modified, terminated at any time in accordance with applicable law. So that's another tool that the city has. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And I also noted that one condition of approval is that the applicant must restore all the landscaping to the original approved plans prior to the city's review and approval. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Just for sake of clarity, which condition number is that?
14, paragraph 14. 14 and 16 currently, under landscaping.
Right, so.
And I ask only
Before I answer that, I want to identify special condition 37, and I just want to make like a big picture comment. So typically, subdivisions come before the plan development is built. So typically, a developer comes in and builds a subdivision. They'll record a tract map and then build the buildings. In this case, there's already a commercial shopping center there that was approved under the plan development permit, CPD 138. So staff put in condition 37 to state that all of the previous conditions that under that plan development permit apply to the new lots created by this subdivision. So that's really what ties in those previously approved landscaping plans that are referred to in condition 14. So it's been a number of years since 1998 when CPD 138 was approved, and as is common, landscaping has a tendency to degrade over time, and so condition 14 requires that the landscape maintenance restores the landscaping to that pristine first-class condition. And staff visited the site today and in collaboration with the applicant identified a list of maintenance items with regard to the landscaping to bring it into conformance with the landscape plan as approved.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
And lastly, we've talked a little bit about the Commercial Owners Association and also the governing conditions, covenants, and restrictions that are referred to as the CCNRs to provide for the maintenance moving forward and ensure the integrity of the commercial center without inconvenience to the public. That may be a continued concern of some members of the public. Can you say a little bit more about how this benefits shoppers and other members of the public to not be inconvenienced and not have to deal with now a disjointed maintenance, et cetera?
I'd say one of the most convenient aspects of this is that the shopping center currently exists. I know there's a number of other shopping centers that are undergoing substantial renovations. For this one, it's really more maintenance of existing conditions, and the disruption to the public would, I think, be minimal because there's no change to the existing buildings, and the long-term maintenance of the landscaping can be performed without disruption to like commercial operations, and it can be done in phases to minimize disruptions to the shopping center and the current tenants.
In short, the public shouldn't be concerned about the deterioration of the aesthetics and maintenance. Is that right?
Right.
Right, if I could just kind of add in a little bit, the Commercial Owners Association will basically is the city's, assurance that it'll still function the way it is right now, currently.
Yeah.
And it'll continue to function that way, in all aspects of the landscaping, the access, and the maintenance and, the parking areas and all that stuff. So the public shouldn't even really notice that, new lines are being drawn and lots are being created because it's still going to function as is currently today.
Great, thank you.
I had kind of a follow-up on that too, is part of the lots being split, are they going to have to, disconnect utilities so that, they can be separately metered on each lot, or is that, or are they going to identify some common things that'll be paid through the association?
I'm sorry, go ahead. I believe that most of the units already actually have their own meters,
I think that's right.
because each one of the tenants is charged for their own utility usage.
Okay. Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Is that all your questions? Okay. Mitchell, could you put the map back up with all of the lot lines on? Since I got a little confused trying to read between the parking lines and the really light lines on what we had.
Sure. Is this the map you're referring to?
Okay, so with that, the COA won't own any land themselves. All the land will be owned by one building or another building or something, depending on what's on that lot.
I even put this animation in here to make that as, I think I breezed over it, Chair. It goes, this is the proposed subdivision, and this is the subject property without the lot lines.
Yeah. And
So
that's,
the CCNRs and the Commercial Owners Association would be responsible for the common areas, which you can think of as the areas outside the buildings themselves
so,
within this property boundary.
all right. Can you put the other one back up?
Yep.
So on this then, 7 has a couple separated buildings, and we've got walkways in between some of the buildings.
Right.
But, so they would be doing all of the land, all of the parking lot and stuff like that, even if it's on a separate lot individually. But then the building maintenance themselves would be to the owners of the separate lots. If it needed roofing or servicing or, anything that it needed, sidewalks needed fixing or anything like that, that would be to the separate owners.
That's my understanding.
Okay. And then anything like, if there are any trip and falls on the sidewalks, that liability would go to the separate owners. Okay,
I'll defer to the applicant.
okay. And, yeah, 'cause it's a little different than what I was trying to see when I was looking at it and couldn't really see all the lines. So, yeah, I think I was trying to look at my other questions, because it was all, I was looking at the buildings as being the different lots and all the other being common area from what I was reading as far as the COA doing the common area and such. And that map helps a lot. Yeah, I think anything I have, might be 1 or 2 more questions for the applicant. So, any other questions? Okay.
I was just going to make one comment. I'm in an office condo thing as well, and there's different square footages, and so our HOA is, we pay for all the common area, but everybody has a different HOA amount based on the square footage
Right.
they own. And so then I think that's probably, I think there's companies that calculate that would probably work that out. And then as part of that, they have, the HOA pays for insurance that covers all the common areas.
The common
Part
areas.
of the monthly due you pay in, so
Yeah, for the,
I would think it'd be similar, but.
yeah, as far as, I would think their insurance would cover anything as far as, like you say, if it's the common area. but then I don't know where the common area ends as far as, like, the paved areas around the building, sidewalks and things like that. I would think that would go with the building. So we might get some clarification on that in a little bit, but, okay. If that's all of the questions for right now, then I will open up the public hearing and see if we have some presentation from the applicants, and in case we have any other questions to ask also. A little bit more clarification maybe on this.
Good evening. My name is Randy Chapman. Represent CCE Design Associates. We're the applicant, representing the owner, Brett Bernard with Milan Capital. I want to address a couple concerns that were brought up. I think the first one being the fact that there's 8 separate lots. I can understand a concern that there might be potential for maintenance to be deferred. I think the kind of the flip side of that would be having 8 separate owners. You might have 1 or 2 of those that need attention, as opposed to, say, for example, 10 years down the road.
Madam Chairperson, I'm sorry to interject. I apologize, sir. Before public testimony can be received, the commission has to make a motion to open the public hearing, which must be seconded.
Oh. Okay. I'm not used.
I motion to open the public hearing.
Thank you. Second?
Second?
Please vote. Thank you. Okay, now we're officially open for the public hearing.
Kind of what I was saying before, if you have 8 separate owners, you might have 1 or 2 that may need attention, as opposed to the entire site, if that entire site were to change ownership down the road. So I think it actually might be a benefit to have multiple owners in that case, if maintenance is a concern. The other thing I'll bring up is the CCNRs will go through a review process at the city. So as far as any of these concerns about how things are going to be maintained, how things are going to be handled with the Commercial Owners Association, the city will have a chance to look at that before that's finalized. So I think a lot of that can kind of be worked out in the details. I'd like to introduce Brett as well.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, members of the commission and staff. I am Brett Bernard. I am with Milan Capital Management. We not only manage the property, but have owned the property. We have no formal presentation ready for questions, but I would like to address, as Randy just did, a number of items you've already brought up. First of all, I want to go out of my way to thank staff for their input throughout this process. It's been a lengthy process, longer than we'd hoped for, but they've been meticulous in their preparation and responsive to us throughout the process, and so we appreciate your fortitude and your counsel in getting us to this point tonight. So thanks very much to staff for this. Quickly, we own, Milan Capital owns through various partnership groups, joint venture groups, a number of other commercial centers, quite a few as a matter of fact. We own, for example, Tuscany Square and Moore Park, so we own a couple here also in the county. We have done similar track maps for those. We still own that center. We are a successor with this center. We'll continue to do it. It's not like we're going to have 8 separate ownerships out there, or do we for the other centers that we own, but we do have the parcels formulated primarily for financing purposes going forward. And the opportunity, if there is an opportunity, to spin off a portion of the site. But generally, even though we have tracks within our commercial centers, they're still wholly owned by either ourselves or a partnership group that we participate in. In terms of one of the commissioners that asked about infighting, how do the property be upkept, that again is handled as was covered by staff through the CCNRs and COA, the Commercial Owners Association. Yes, for example, the buildings themselves, the sidewalks directly in front of those buildings are responsible for whoever owns that building. However, the common areas, landscaping, the road of travel, both walking and cars throughout the site, those common areas are maintained by the COA and the CCNRs. And one of the conditions, as as Commissioner Lamone in her condition suggested this afternoon, the refinements sort of address that in terms of, yes, they are to be handled in mass, and it's not only is the ownership group responsible, but the mechanism, walking the site today, not only with code, your community development staff, but also code enforcement staff, that also remains in place going forward for handling any issues out there. If there were a separation of 8 different parties out there, you would go after the COA, but also the individual ownership group. So as Randy pointed out, it actually gives you, this process, you actually can go after 2 groups then to make sure that any deficiencies going forward are handled. As Paul pointed out, we did meet this afternoon. We've had an exchange with staff for the last couple of weeks. Not only are the conditions that were added in the last couple of weeks repeated in the site development plan, but have been added to this. So we're satisfied that that any deficiencies in the aesthetics out there will be handled, and they are being handled. A number of items that we looked at today, as we pointed out to staff, are already in different, either with engineering, with public works, or being worked on and planned for now, too. So those are in place. We want to have this be a showpiece in the community, so we're working to upgrade and make sure that we are consistent with not only requirements from this action and but also with the current conditions of approval. We did read, not only did we agree with before the previous set of conditions of approval, but we had an opportunity to read the red line strikeout that was provided this afternoon, and we agreed to those changes too. They're a little tighter, so thank you for that. Landscaping. In walking the site today, it is not up to, I did have a chance to drive other centers in the community, and it's not up to landscaping standards up by several nearby in the community. So we look to upgrade those. I would point out, as we spoke with Mitchell and Paul this afternoon, that the landscaping we hope to do out there to improve it will not match what was approved in 1998. It's going to adhere to modern sensibilities and standards, such as more drought-tolerant plants than are there now and should not be there going forward. Not only in terms of water safety, but just water savings, but in terms of just a newer, fresher look. So that's one thing we're going to be working on. This is not an unusual process, I want to point out, although it may not be typical here in Camarillo. This is a fairly typical process even for existing centers in terms of modifying trap packs, again, for financing and commercial purposes. And I think I've handled everything that, the questions that I heard before, but remain available for any more questions the council may have, commission may have.
Okay. Any questions down here?
Hi, thank you for that. I continue just to be concerned, and I appreciate your comments about your organization maintaining it now. But as we know, the economy changes and intentions change, and a scenario in which there are multiple owners could occur. So with that sort of scenario in mind, the bylaws that will govern this COA, are they already in place? Are there things that the city has seen? I know we're talking the CC&Rs are there, but what about how this organization is even run? Are they going to be required to have money in some type of a trust, sort of like what an HOA does? So if the problems arise, it can be taken care of then, or are they going to have to go, basically with a shoebox and collect money from each owner? And old man Jeffries, who bought it as an investment and wants to do nothing, balks at it, and now we're in litigation, and you guys, So I'm sorry that I keep going to these doomsday scenarios, but that's the things that you don't anticipate that then 10, 20 years from now are affecting our community. So can you, one, talk about that? Are these bylaws in place, and what kind of assurances or insurance policies or what have you might be in place so that we don't run into that type of thing? If you can address that generally and specifically.
You want me to take it? Yeah. Okay. The mechanism in place is as, I'm not sure if it was one staff or one of the commissioners alluded to before. There is a process in place. You have disparate sizes of buildings out there and areas. It is typical with the HOA that you described for your commercial entity where your office is, based upon a number of factors, not just size, but each pays into a common fund for maintenance. And so that is how the upkeep is kept up, is through that funding mechanism that everyone's required to pay into on a normal, usually monthly basis to make sure the fund is there to do it. And again, the city, if that group, the COA that's formed with the CCNRs does not adhere to those, the city would come after the COA and also that individual owner. But in terms of the common areas, you would come after the COA. But there is a funding mechanism to make sure that this takes place. It's a very good question.
Thank you.
And not an unusual concern.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, so on that funding mechanism, will there be an assessment, evaluation, short-term cost, and long-term maintenance, a general assessment report?
Yes, Commissioner Murphy, that is the case in that you have a long-term fund, you also have a short-term fund that handles those types of concerns. Long going, you have a mechanism, a deposit account where you're planning for slurry sealing the parking lot every 5 years or whatever the normal period is. But you also have an emergency fund for, damage, God forbid, tornado or something like that would come through. So there are both mechanisms in the COA and the CCNRs that would provide for that.
All right, thanks.
Well, thank you.
Do you have any additional? What was I going to ask? On these, because they're going to be then separate ownerships, and looking at accounts and reserve accounts, when it's something like this where there's several ownerships, do they set up their individual, like reserve accounts and accounts for funding to maintain their buildings and the part that they have to maintain?
Yeah, that's again, worst case scenario. We don't envision presently then there being 8 separate owners, but if that were the case, I can't speak to each individual ownership and how they're going to handle their reserve accounts, but the COA and the CCNRs will require a common fund that they have to pay into. So if they want to finance that, however they want to do as an individual into that, I can't speak to that, but the common maintenance areas would be paid into a general fund via the COA.
I just kind of see a little bit of a concern thinking of a residential HOA and you've got the houses, whether they, maintain theirs or not, versus, whatever the HOA is doing as far as yards or flood basins or parks or, whatever. So that's a little bit concerning to me. And then, do you actually have a market of buyers that want to purchase properties like this? And have you been successful on your other properties of being able to sell the separate lots?
The intent is not to separate either Camarillo Village Square or, for example, Tuscany Square, where we took a smaller center and subdivided it into 5 areas. That we still own in mass. But it just, again, provides for if we want to do something with a certain building within that larger space, we can finance that separately as opposed to having to finance and have the entire entity be responsible for that. So I think the concerns, I understand your concern, but again, I think the mechanisms place both the requirements, the conditions of approval, but also the requirements with the COA are such that those concerns will be handled, especially with code enforcement. Again, staff identified a number of concerns they had out there, not just landscaping, but some physical improvements that have not been kept up to snuff. And so that would be brought not only to the individual track owner, but that would be brought to the COA. So it's, as Randy alluded to, it's actually, this is adding another layer of opportunity for code enforcement staff, city staff to come and make sure that it's maintained in the standard it should be, and that city would expect it to be.
So right now, even though it did mention that they could be sold or transferred or something, you're not foreseeing these individual lots being sold separately?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it can't happen, but no, that's not our intent, and that's not the intent with our other centers. We have similarly gone through a process like this.
Okay. Because that would take care of, that would limit some of the questions as far as the maintenance and, the appearance and making sure everything is kept up.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that there won't be issues in the future. It's like Vice Chair Edsel referred to his office, his business, living in a condoized situation. That doesn't mean you're not going to have one person, somebody alluded to, Miserly Jones, that the association may have to go up for that one owner in terms of you've not paid in if it were divided in the future and you had 3 owners, 4 owners, 8 owners there. That the mass wouldn't have to go after the one. I can't promise that's not going to happen. It shouldn't happen, but the mechanism is in place that they could enforce that they pay their percentage into the maintenance. So,
Yeah. I know for me, I'm a lot more familiar with industrial condos and commercial condos, and how they divide those up, but this is totally different than, what I've looked at, and, as far as shared parking spaces or, shared areas in the lot and such, so. But I think you answered my questions. Thank you. Okay, all right. So with no other questions for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So then, we didn't receive any public comments, did we? Okay, so then if there are no other questions, I think we can close the public hearing, but if we needed a motion to open it, then do we also need a motion to close? Okay,
Motion to close.
Second.
okay. Commissioner Lamone and Commissioner Murphy on those. Please vote. Okay. So then, if we're completed that, are there any additional discussions from the commissioners tonight? Comments, questions?
I just say I think it's fine. I think we addressed all the problems. I appreciate Commissioner Lamone coming up with this because it's already done and approved, and the applicants approved it. And if there's not any further discussion, I'd call for a resolution unless there's other discussion.
There is one issue. I think I'm going to end up reversing myself on a suggested edit. We've been talking about the common and non-common areas. On condition 34, it pertained to owners of the properties, and now this goes to regularly and promptly removing graffiti, maintaining exteriors and clean and attractive conditions, et cetera. And I think that was intention, is that this would run to the owners of the non-common areas. Is that right? And if so, then it should revert back to the owners and not inserting this into the COA and CCNRs. Is that correct?
Which item is that?
Condition 34.
34? Oh, I thought you said 4, and I was a little lost. Let me go back here.
This should actually, I believe, be both. I think we would include it, this is covered in many places. It's covered in the city's municipal code. It should also be covered in the CCNR so that it runs with the land, and then it should also be subject to each individual owner as well.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Okay. All right. So then we can,
Call for a resolution, I guess.
Resolution number PC 2023-10, Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo recommending approval to the City Council of a request by CCE Design Associates Incorporated to subdivide 22.45 acres into 8 lots located south of Las Posas Road and east of Arneal Road in the city's commercial plan development zone, further described as T6080.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to waive further reading and vote for adoption. Pardon me? Oh, yeah, the motion would include with the changes that were submitted tonight as Exhibit B with the red line and blue line thing.
Okay.
So,
All right. So do we have a second? Right? You moved to,
yeah, I
Is the
moved
motion
to,
complete?
Do we consider CEQA first, or is that rolled into the
that's part of the resolution, isn't it?
Yeah, sequence,
the resolution?
part of the resolution.
Got it, okay. I'll second.
okay. All right, so we have the motion by Commissioner Etzel and the second, which of you was the second? Commissioner Murphy. So please vote. Okay. So with that then, it's passed, which is after a lot of discussions and changes and a lot of work here. So then, next item is director's comments.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of things here. Just want to remind the Planning Commission that we're going to do our picture day for our city portrait on our website on May 2nd. So not the next
Yeah.
meeting, but the meeting after that.
And I'm going to be gone that meeting. I hadn't told you yet. We'll be on vacation, sorry.
Well, maybe the second meeting in May, we'll have our picture day. But we'll send out plenty of notice so we don't spring it on you the night of.
Okay.
And then also, we have items tracking for all 3 of the next meetings that we have regularly scheduled, the April 18th, May 2nd, and May 16th. So we still have a bunch of items coming your way.
That was May 2nd and May 16th?
Yeah, the April 18th, May 2nd, and May 16th.
15th, okay. All right. Any closing comments from the commissioners? I would like to especially thank all of you that worked on this. I mean, it was very confusing. I got confused. The only thing I would have liked to have had was the outline map that better delineated the different parcels, to look at when I was looking at it, because to me, it was like the buildings and then what was the extra was Lot 8, like all the extra land. So to me, I mean, I would have loved to have had that other page showing. But there was a lot of work put into this, a lot of last-minute work, and I really appreciate the commissioners and the staff for everything that was added to this that made it work. So, thank you. And then, with that, I will adjourn the meeting.